All right, so we've spent a lot of time breaking down ASML's business, right? We've looked at the numbers, the monopoly, the whole nine yards. But to really get why their moat is so deep, you've got to go back to the beginning. So that's what we're going to do today. We're digging into the origin story, the absolutely wild history of how this company even came to exist.
Okay, and before we jump in, just a quick heads up. What you're about to hear is a deep dive on company history. It's a strategic case study, plain and simple. We're unpacking the story, not telling you what to do with your money. So this is not, I repeat, not investment advice. All right, with that out of the way, let's get into it.
Every legendary company has an origin story, right? Well, ASML's is pretty much off the charts. And this quote from their very first CEO, Jout Smit, just nails it. He says it started like the Big Bang, but then the arrival of Martin was an act of God. That really sets the scene, doesn't it? An impossible start, and then a miracle. So let's kick things off with Act 1, a good idea, but a really bad plan. Picture this. It's 1984. The chip industry is booming. Inside this huge Dutch company, Philips, a small team has this brilliant idea for a new lithography machine. The only problem? Philips, the parent company, had absolutely no idea what to do with it. In fact, they kind of hated it. And this really gets to the core of the problem. I mean, look at the mismatch here. Philips made TVs, radios, household stuff. They were a consumer company through and through. ASML, on the other hand, was trying to build this one, single, impossibly complex industrial machine. It's a completely different universe. For the execs at Philips, this whole lithography project was just a giant, expensive headache they didn't want. So what did they do? They spun it off. But listen, this was not some glorious Silicon Valley startup story. ASML was basically born in a leaky shed next to a Philips office. Seriously. The parents, Philips and another company, were reluctant investors at best. And to top it all off, they were walking into a market with about 10 heavy-hitting competitors, including giants like Nikon and Canon. I mean, this thing was designed to fail from day one. But right from the start, their first CEO, Jout Smit, brought this incredible focus. He basically said, look, in this game, there is no silver medal. You get the gold or you go home. He instilled this hardcore winner's mentality that became the company's absolute core. You had to be obsessed with being number one, or you wouldn't survive. And man, was he right. And then you get the act of God part of the story. A 27-year-old physicist, a guy named Martin van den Brink, walks in the door. And this guy is just a force of nature. Almost right away, he comes up with a new alignment system that is just light years ahead of the competition. He patents it, and boom, suddenly this little underdog has a real weapon. This was the guy who would become the soul of the company's technology. Okay, so that technical edge was the spark, which brings us to part 2, beating the big boys. Now it's not just about surviving anymore. Now it's about actually winning. And their secret weapon was a machine called the PASS 5500. Now, the genius here wasn't just the tech, it was the design philosophy. See, their competitors were building these huge one-piece machines, monoliths. ASML went modular. Think of it like Legos. You could swap parts, upgrade components on the fly, and fix things way faster. For customers, this was a revolution. It completely changed the game. And here's the story that tells you everything you need to know about their culture. They desperately needed a big-name customer, and the whale was IBM Big Blue. But then Operation Desert Storm hits in 1991, and a travel ban means IBM's people can't fly to Europe. Deal's dead, right? Nope. Martin van den Brink literally filmed a video of the machine working, packed up his team, and flew to New York to show it to them. It was such a bold, insane move, and it worked. They landed IBM. But here's the thing. A technical genius like van den Brink can be confrontational. You need balance. And that's where Peter Wenning comes in. Wenning was the other half of the equation, the finance guy, the relationship builder. If Martin was the fiery technical conscience, Peter was the smooth operator who could charm customers and Wall Street. You had this perfect yin and yang at the top, and that's what let them really scale up. So with the leadership sorted, the tech breakthroughs just kept coming. And their next one was pure genius. It's called immersion lithography. But really, it was the water trick. Instead of trying to invent a whole new kind of light source, which is insanely hard, they found a loophole in physics. They just put a tiny drop of ultra-pure water between the lens and the chip. That little drop of water bent the light just enough to draw circuits that were way, way smaller. So simple, but so powerful. And then they combined that water trick with another innovation called the twin scan platform. This let their machines prep one silicon wafer while they were printing on another one. It was a massive productivity boost. That 1-2 punch, the water trick plus twin scan, was basically game over for the competition. Nikon, Canon, they just couldn't keep up. ASML had built its first real unassailable lead. But being the leader wasn't the end goal. To stay the leader forever, they had to do something completely crazy. So welcome to Act 3, Building the Impossible. This was their Moonshot, a 20-year quest to build something that, frankly, many believed was physically impossible. Just look at this timeline. They started working on this idea, extreme ultraviolet, or EUV, back in 1997. 1997. They didn't ship a machine that was ready for mass production until 2017. 20 years. 2 decades of grinding, failing, and pouring billions of dollars into an idea that most of the industry thought was a dead end. That's not a project, that's an obsession. So, what is this impossible machine? How does it even work? Well, it's straight out of science fiction. You take a super powerful laser and you fire it at a tiny, tiny droplet of molten tin. You do this 50,000 times a second. Each hit vaporizes the tin into a plasma that's hotter than the surface of the sun, which gives off this special EUV light. Then, a series of the flattest, most perfect mirrors ever made by humans guide that light to print the chip, and this all has to happen in a perfect vacuum. It's just absolutely insane. And the scale of this thing is just mind-boggling. A single one of the new high-end EUV machines weighs 150 tons. And it costs about 400 million euros. It takes seven jumbo jets just to ship one of them. We're not talking about building a new machine here. They literally had to invent an entirely new class of industrial technology. So, the obvious question is, how on earth do you pay for a multi-decade, multi-billion-dollar bet like that? This was Peter Wenning's masterstroke. He went to his biggest customers, Intel, TSMC, Samsung, and said, hey, you guys need this machine to survive in the future, so you should help us wait for it. And they did. They co-invested billions. This move was brilliant. Not only did it fund the R&D, but it locked in his customers and guaranteed he had buyers for a product that didn't even exist yet. And this really sums it all up. During every industry downturn, when the Japanese competitors got cautious and cut the research budgets, ASML did the opposite. They kept spending. They kept investing in the future. And that relentless, long-term focus is precisely how they built an absolute 100% monopoly on the single most important technology in the modern world. So they did it. They conquered physics. They built the impossible machine. But winning that battle threw them onto a completely new battlefield. And that brings us to our final act, the geopolitical spotlight. Suddenly, this isn't a story about business anymore. It's about global power. Because when you are the only company in the world that can make the machine that makes the most advanced computer chips, you're not just a company anymore. You're a gatekeeper. You're a strategic choke point for the entire global economy. ASML now holds the keys to the kingdom, and every major world power wants a set. And that, of course, puts them smack in the middle of the growing tech conflict between the US and China. It's pretty straightforward, really. The US wants to maintain its technological lead and prevent its rivals from getting their hands on the most advanced chips, especially for military use. China desperately wants that same technology to become self-sufficient and break free from US control. And ASML's machines, they're ground zero. So this is the new world for ASML. Who they sell to is no longer a simple business decision. It's a high-stakes diplomatic one. Washington is leaning hard on the Dutch government to block sales of not just the latest EUV machines to China, but even some of the older DUV machines. So now, the company's future growth isn't just about R&D and engineering, it's about trying to navigate this impossible geopolitical maze. Which leaves us with this final massive question. The entire story of ASML is about one thing: focus. An insane, relentless focus on technology and on being number one. That focus let them beat their competitors, and it let them beat the laws of physics. But can that same legendary focus work against the messy, unpredictable chaos of geopolitics? That is the next, and maybe the toughest chapter in this company's amazing story.